Psalms 126 is my favorite passage in scripture. It has been my entire life, and it says this: "It was like a dream come true when you freed us from our bondage and brought us back to Zion. We laughed and overflowed with gladness. We were left shouting for joy and singing your praise, because all the nations saw it and joined in, saying, 'The Lord has done great miracles for them. Yes, he did mighty miracles, and we are overjoyed.' Now, Lord, do it again. Restore us to our former glory. May streams of your refreshing flow over us until our dry hearts are drenched again. Those who sow in tears will reap a harvest with joyful shouts of glee. They may weep as they go out carrying their seed to sow, but they will return with joyful laughter and shouting with gladness as they bring back armloads of blessing and a harvest overflowing." So my fertility journey begins a little bit further back than maybe what you heard from Sheldon last week. I remember thinking about being a mom for the first time when I was 6 years old. That A, God told me I was going to marry a black man. Check. That B, I was going to have 6 children. I don't necessarily know that the God told me part was on plan B. It was sort of in my heart that I was supposed to have 6 children. And that idea totally freaks me out right now. Just having one newborn, even so unexpectedly, I can't imagine having 6 children right now. And so if you have 6 children, I'm so impressed. You know, that was like my heart was mothering from a very young age. And I was able to be a mother figure of sorts to my 2 younger sisters growing up at times of our lives. And then beyond that, I was the resident director of a dorm full of girls at my Bible college. In that season of my life, I did a lot of mothering per se, and I think by the time I got to being on the world race, if you've ever heard of it, it's 11 countries in 11 months. That's sort of like the thing about it. By the time I got there, I was slightly weary of mothering, but yet was eventually put into a role as a team leader. And because I was a little bit older than some of the rest, I know like one of the guys on one of my teams eventually told Sheldon she was like a mom to me. Odd, because you know she's not that much older than me, but I'm quite a bit older than him. That was very nice of him to say. Hearing him say that after we returned, I was like, I did. I even showed maternal instincts with grown adults. I feel like even through pastoring and just so many different seasons of my life, that those maternal instincts do come out, and they have come out over the course of my life in ways that I didn't even realize at the time they were. And so I know there was a calling to be a mom on my life, but I think because it was fleshed out in so many different ways than expected over the years, that by the time Sheldon and I met, we both, were kind of in agreement that we discussed that we may not even ever have children. We weren't sure if that was something God was calling us to, and that we weren't sure if it was something we really wanted. And we'll reassess, as the years go by. And I did know I wasn't getting any younger. And so when we got married, we even talked, I think it was the week before we got married, just to make sure we were on the same page. We're both okay with possibly not having children, or maybe reevaluating it soon. Just kind of, we'll see what happens. A little bit of the story from Sheldon, and so I don't want to be redundant, but at the same time, it is a little bit of a different perspective coming from me. I remember the night that he mentioned where I think we had just climbed into bed, and he rolled over and said, "I want to have a baby with you." And so incredibly shocked. And for those that don't know, I was a virgin when we got married. And so our wedding night was the first time I had had sex, and there would be just no way in my mind that that night we would have conceived. On our honeymoon, on the first week of me ever having sexual intercourse, that I would get pregnant. That thought never crossed my mind. I was using protection. I was on medication. We also used extra precautions. And yet, shortly after Sheldon told me that he wanted to have a baby with me, our life took a radical turn. That night, though, I don't want to go past that moment when he told me that. There was something that sparked inside of me that said I wanted to have a baby with him also. But it wasn't like I was like, I want to do this now. It was more like, awesome. Then we're on the same page, I think. Like, I don't even know if I actually responded to him that night other than just in a loving, sweet response. But I know that I wasn't saying, hey, let's do this right now. So it wasn't long after, as Sheldon said, that I was actually meeting one of my best friends now. I was meeting her for the first time in a more detailed way, like actually sitting around a fire, chatting, getting to know each other. And we were new to a church. We were new to this group of friends. I was newer than Sheldon because I had come off the mission field. And so and he already was there at the church. And so talking to this friend, I was getting to know her, and I was super focused on just the depth of our conversation and how quickly it went deep and how quickly I felt like she was a kindred spirit. So I started cramping that night during that conversation, but I just honestly assumed, because I had skipped my cycle before, because of our wedding, I just assumed that that's what was coming. I remember the cramping. I remember watching the flames flicker and the cramping getting a little bit stronger and stronger, to the point that I actually told Sheldon, hey, I need to go. I'm having really bad cramps. And I remember him being like, oh, that's odd. Yeah, we headed home, and I remember I was really struggling that evening with feeling bad cramps, and then suddenly it quit. Suddenly the cramps stopped, and I remember being able to drift off to sleep. The next morning I woke up, and I don't really remember what the morning held, but I decided that I was going to take a bath. And I got into the bathtub, and I just wanted to soak. It was like, man, yesterday was rough. These cramps were rough. It was nerve-wracking meeting all those new people and everything. And so I just was like, I'm going to soak. I'm going to do a bubble bath. I'm going to do whatever I need to do, bath bomb, and I'm just going to soak. And I remember getting in to do that, and then suddenly feeling a sensation I had never felt before as I proceeded to miscarry in the tub. It was so shocking, and because I was in the tub, it was just like in water. It was just different than it would have been had I not been. And so I just look back at that moment. I remember it happening so fast. And my confusion and the fear of, what is this? Oh my goodness, like this is happening. This is real. And I remember reaching into the water and scooping up into my hand what had come straight out of my body. And I remember looking at it, saying a quick prayer, and being like, this was my child. And then I just remember the panic, the sheer panic coming over me. And I remember just dropping it into the toilet and flushing it as fast as I could, and getting back into the tub and freezing. And I don't know how long I sat there. I don't think it was too long, But then it hit me what I had done, that this had all happened so fast that I hadn't even shown it to Sheldon. And so I started screaming for him. And I just remember screaming his name and him coming, busting through the door, locked or not, I can't remember. I just remember it busting open and him staring at me and me staring at him, and almost this humiliation of the moment. And me looking at him and saying, I just had a miscarriage. And he was like, oh, babe, no, I don't think so. And he was looking at the water and he was like, are you sure it's not just your period? Or, and I'm like, no, I'm sure. But there was so much shock in that moment that I couldn't fully describe what I had seen or what I had held. And to be honest with you, I had never seen anything like it. I couldn't describe to him. Like, I kept trying to describe to him what I had held in my hands, and he got me out of the tub. He got me a towel, and I got out of the tub, and I went and sat on the bed, and I was trying to explain to him, or I might have even sat there in the bathroom. I can't remember, but I just remember trying to explain to him, like, no, this is what happened. I know it. And there's nothing else it could have been. Jumping on Google. Like, I just remember jumping on my phone and trying to Google and search what had happened to make sure I was right, because if he was questioning it, then I started a little bit to question myself. And I don't know if you've ever looked at images like I saw that night, but they're pretty scarring because well, for obvious reasons. And I knew that's what had happened. I called my mom next, and she's a nurse practitioner now, as you know or may not know. So, I really trust her opinion. Back up just not even a week prior to this, I thought I might be pregnant. There was a moment 6 days earlier where Sheldon and I were driving home from a friend's wedding, and I was extremely nauseous and literally leaning over just to keep my dinner down. Literally having to have him pull over at every gas station, which is never my MO. So I'm usually so proud that I can go on like a 7-hour road trip without having to stop. And so I had called my mom and told her, like, hey, is there any way that I could have gotten pregnant on my honeymoon? Take some tests. So, I had done a few tests. Like, I had taken a few tests, taken 3 different tests, and they were all negative. My mom knew that there had been a chance that I had been pregnant. However, that moment, and I think this is just my perspective of the people close to me that were finding out about what I was telling them had happened, is that they just simply couldn't accept it right away. There had to be another explanation. And so I wanted to believe them, like, there has to be another explanation. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I held. I knew what I felt. Mom was going to come over and talk with us. Unfortunately, I had discarded what I had to show, what I had to prove my theory with. I had quickly seen wash away. There's hardly been any other moments that I have regretted more in my life than how quickly I discarded my first child. But in my spirit, I still have to submit that negative thought about myself, that I did that so rashly, especially without letting Sheldon, the father, have closure in that moment like I had. I still have to forgive myself for that when I think about it, and I think that's just the reality of continuing to forgive yourself about things of the past. Obviously, I was in a traumatic state, and I didn't really even know what I was doing, and it was out of sheer panic. But still, it's something that I have to go, no, I don't need to be angry with myself about that. I have to continuously, when that comes to mind, which is fewer and fewer times as the years go by, but I have to kind of say, no, I accept what I did. I understand that that was out of panic, out of the trauma of the moment, and I don't hold that against myself, and just speak those affirmations about that moment. But so here we are, my husband, my mom, they're both just in shock over it and just can't accept that this has happened. I call one of my lifelong best friends that had also been through miscarriage before, and I told her what had happened. I remember just laying on my floor, crying and screaming into the phone about what had happened and how no one believed me. Of course, I wasn't even realizing the trauma that my loved ones were under at that moment, but I just kept saying, I need you to believe me. I need you to believe me. This happened. And she said, I believe you. I don't care whether it happened or not. I believe you. I know that you need me to believe you right now, and so I believe you. If you say that's what happened, that's what happened. I was able to hang up with her pretty quickly, and Sheldon came at that time, and I just remember him sinking down next to me in resolve that whether he knew logically or not that this had taken place, in his spirit, he was going to come into agreement with me. And he did in that moment. And he wrapped his arms around me and held me. And we moved on with life. I went to the doctor and they said that it very well could have been an ectopic pregnancy because there was free fluid in my abdomen and in my fallopian tube. And so very potentially the pregnancy might not have remained viable. Should I change the birth control I'm on? And they said, absolutely, let's do that because obviously it's not strong enough for you. Changed my birth control, and moving forward with our fertility, we were like, okay, well, we went through something traumatic. We went through something that no one should have to go through, but unfortunately so many people do. But we're not ready to have kids yet. Let's get on this new type of birth control and let's continue. It was about 2 months later, 8 weeks to be exact, my birthday, as Sheldon mentioned, when out of nowhere, completely unexpectedly, with no prior signs of pregnancy of any sort, I began to have cramps again on a timing that should not have been my period. And I remember telling Sheldon, these cramps feel familiar, but surely not. Like, I just remember being like, there's no way this is happening again. I switched birth control, and to be honest, we had only been sexually active one time because of all that we had gone through. It's a rough first few months of marriage, especially for somebody who had waited for so long. Here we were, and the cramps began to get worse and worse. Well, unfortunately, I was around 8 weeks pregnant at that time, and so I did actually that night labor through my miscarriage this time more severely than the first. I began to have contractions, actual contractions. We did call my mom. She came over and she called the emergency room. It was later in the evening. We talked, to them, and they said this is really the only thing that can be happening. And even though we still weren't positive that that's what was happening, I remember even that time myself being hesitant to believe that this was happening again, probably more hesitant than the first time. And so here we were, me laying in our bed, Sheldon holding my hands, gripping them so tightly. And, it's funny the things you remember. By funny, I don't mean funny. But I remember him brushing my head like this. And I remember him doing it so many times that my skin felt raw every time he would touch it. And there was a part of me that wanted him to stop, but there were no words to tell him, could you stop doing that? I needed his comfort more than I needed him to stop. My mom stood on my other side and held my other hand, and together we labored through that miscarriage. And at about 2:00 in the morning, I woke up with that same sensation. And I went to the bathroom, and this time I knew, don't panic. I just told myself, don't panic. Don't panic. You want him to be with you in this, so don't panic. And after I had passed an identical looking substance, but this time into my hand, I sat and I held it and I looked at it, because that's what traumatized people do, is we stare at our pain. And I knew I needed better closure than the first time. And so I just stared, and I remember thinking, and maybe even saying out loud, I don't remember, I'm sorry I had to lose you. And I remember at that point calling Sheldon's name. He woke up pretty quickly, thank goodness. I didn't have to scream it. I just said it a few times, and he came in, and I held it closed so he could make his own choice. And I said, I did miscarry, and it's the same as before, but this time I didn't panic, and I have it here in my hands, but I need to know if you want to see it. If not, that's totally fine. I'm gonna let it. I'm actually gonna keep it, because my mom and this is a really disturbing part of the story, is that it had to happen this way, and I know that, but my mom actually encouraged me to keep it so that it could be tested. The offices ended up closed, and they couldn't get me in before they closed for the holidays, and so we had to just keep it until the offices reopen. As soon as they did, right after Christmas, or it might have been right after New Year's, whatever the soonest day was that they opened up, we went in for an appointment. My mom came with me, and she had not looked yet at it because I hadn't wanted her to, and we were there in the office, and they did the exam, and then they said, now we understand that you have a specimen for us to test. And I said, yes, I do. And I pulled it out of the bag that I had been carrying it in. She looked at it, and she looked up at my mom, and I remember the exchange of glances. And I remember my mom peering down at the bag and back up at the nurse practitioner. And I remember the nurse practitioner saying, okay, honey, we're going to go get this tested, and we'll be back. We'll let you know, but it's going to be a little bit of time. And I said, no problem. We'll be here. So yeah, the nurse practitioner came back in, and she said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but we're not going to be able to tell you the answer today. And I said, okay, no problem. I kind of didn't figure you would be able to anyway. And I think Mom and I went next door and got coffee, and coping mechanism for sure. They did test it, and they didn't find any anomalies or anything else. And so we never really got answers for why I got pregnant in the first place. But they did put me on a third type of birth control. And I will say, for the following years, I never did get pregnant again. Days following the news of us having our second miscarriage and it being confirmed, not having answers, knowing that we had gotten pregnant when we weren't trying to, and now we weren't sure could we even make it through trying to get pregnant. Being told at that point, wow, you guys must be fertile and myrtle because you got pregnant while using contraceptives, and all the different things that were said about us. I mean, we never could have ever expected to then have trouble actually getting pregnant again. But we did. We took a break. I will tell you, we received a lot of prayer. I remember some prayer circles around us. I remember staff meetings at the church where people were praying so heavily for us. For the first time in my life, I was angry at God. And let me tell you, I've been through some stuff in my life. So the fact that I had yet to that point experienced that type of anger towards God, that was surprising to me. Then I had to work through the guilt and shame that I felt anger towards this God that I believed in as sovereign. And so there was a season in like May to June of 2015 where I really worked through what had happened that prior year, or 6 months rather. And it wasn't until 1 year after I had worked through all of that that we actually felt ready to pursue having a baby.